Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me here. I am so excited to talk about this. So, this is my first real video of my channel, and I was trying to think where to start. There is so much amazing sci fi out there, so many great AIs and robots in movies and TV shows. Where to start? So, I decided to start with the classic, the like ultimate cult classic of Star Trek The Next Generation. So I thought I would go through season 1, episode 1. We're going to talk about Data. I adore Data. I absolutely adore Data. So this is going to be a lot of fun. If you have not seen The Next Generation, go watch. Just go watch the first episode. I realized the first thing I do in my YouTube channel should not be like to tell somebody to go watch something else, but the world is a better place if more people know about Star Trek. So, I'm going to talk about season 1, episode 1. There are some spoilers, right? But yeah, you've been warned. And now, even though we're talking about Data, I can't help but bring up a picture of Captain Picard. Patrick Stewart is like, oh, amazing. He's absolutely amazing. And so I couldn't help myself. I had to put a picture of him up here. Okay, so I rewatched the episode last night and I was really excited to see that Data is actually in the first conversation of the show. I had forgotten that. So that was really fun to see. And in this conversation, he was talking about how the orders from Starfleet were really easy. Oh, solve the mystery. Oh, that's really easy. And Patrick Picard, Captain Picard was saying, maybe not, maybe not. So I think it's interesting that Data thought that solving a mystery would be easy. Anyway, but then later on in that conversation, I called total BS on Data not knowing the meaning of the word snoop. Really? I mean, this is a high functioning android and he doesn't know like the full dictionary. He knows the dictionary. Like if this were real, if this were real, he would know the dictionary. He would know every version of the dictionary. He would know the dictionary in every language. Like he knows what Snoop means. He would in real life. So I call total BS. I know. The writers just probably wanted some comic relief or something, but total BS on, the AI side. And they said, he only knows words associated with actions he's supposed to emulate. No. No. You have to be able to interact with people and identify, behaviors that maybe you haven't seen, like with a complex android. Like, just no. No. Total BS on this. Okay. Then we get into a bit of an interesting human robot interaction part of this. Human robot interaction, we just always condense down to HRI in our little robotics world here. So if I say HRI, human robot interaction, uh, Data gives too much detail in a conversation, and this makes Picard annoyed. And this is an interesting thing from a human robot interaction standpoint because your robot's behavior or your AI's behavior can evoke emotional responses in the people you're interacting with, even when you really don't want that to happen. Um, and this is a case of that where Data is responding in a way that doesn't necessarily like it's not how other people talk in conversation. It kind of violates that normal like human type of social behavior by giving too much detail, and Picard starts to get annoyed and Data doesn't respond to that shift. He doesn't read the body language, doesn't read the facial expressions, and Picard finally gets so annoyed that he interrupts Data. And creating ideal interactions, like it's not easy to make robots do that at all. This is a very difficult thing. And so I was interested to see that type of interaction. And I mean, this is a real problem in HRI. So thought that was an interesting example of that. Oh yes, and Data was saying, to seek covertly, to go stealthily, to sling, slither, glide, creep, skulk. I just it's funny. Yeah, good comic relief there, but that's just people don't do that when interacting. And so you really have to pay attention to the interactions in HRI. Okay, then we go to the next scene, and Q arrives. Q, yes. Okay, I know a lot of people don't like Q. I think I'll convince you eventually. I kind of like Q. He's annoying in the beginning. It's true. So Q is played by John Delancey, which, by the way, John Delancey is an amazing narrator. He has at least I've listened to one of his books through Audible. Like if you go through Amazon, they have Audible. It's all about audio books. And he just does a fantastic job. It was a very enjoyable experience. He was narrating a Star Trek book with Q in it. So he did his Q voice, but he studied he must have studied all of the other actors because he mimicked their voices. Um, and not just pitch or something like that, but their cadence and where they would have put the stresses on words in their sentences and things like that. It was just it was a very enjoyable experience. So I'm a fan of John Delancey. Check it out. Okay, so one of the things that Data has to do is Picard turns to him and says, search the engineering specs to see if we can do this thing. It's like separating from the saucer section at warp speed. And so Data has to search engineering specs for a certain answer. Like, is this thing I'm asking you within specs, out of specs, that type of thing. And I'm going to call this plausible. Okay. So this is almost like a Google search with a natural language interface, right? So Picard says something verbally, and that has to be transcribed to speech from speech to text, right? Verbal speech to text. And that is done, we do that with automatic speech recognition. That's what we call it. So like if you're using Siri or something like that, and you speak vocally into your phone or something and have Siri process it, it's using automatic speech recognition, which has gotten a lot better in recent years because of very large data set sizes and deep learning. So we have that part of it, and then we have the natural language side today, that's getting a lot better, that can replicate this, this part of the interaction, and then it's almost like a search or a Google search of, okay, we have the engineering specs. Can you look into them to see if this is in or out of spec? And I buy that. I buy that is possible for Data to do easily. I buy that it's something that is not impossible for us to do now. Engineers have a whole lot of specs, requirements, things like this subsystem or this piece of hardware, this sensor can withstand this amount of temperature for this amount of time, right? And so that is within spec, but if you exceed the amount of time, it's outside of spec, right? So we have very rigid ways, as engineers, of representing these types of requirements. And by the way, like without fail, if there are other engineers watching this, almost the first thing that seems to happen anytime as an engineer you create this amazing system and somebody else uses it is they take it out of spec. Like you say, it will work. I promise it will work if you stay within this envelope of operational considerations. And they're like, oh no, I'm gonna go over here. What are you doing to my system, my amazing system that I spent so much time creating, and you're gonna, oh, yes. It always happens, and we know it always happens. Anyway, so the next part is Data is told to search for a theoretical capability. Like, okay, so the specs say not to do this, but do you, like, is there anything about a theoretical capability that says we can do this, that it's possible, that it's not going to completely die, completely explode the spacecraft if we do this thing? Uh, and so that's sort of looking within safety tolerances and things like that. And um, I can, I can sort of see that we can do this now if things like tolerances and error, envelopes and things like that are represented in engineering specs. But if Data had to do kind of his own analysis, saying, like, okay, here's the engineering specs, I'm going to propose this possible idea, what's going to happen afterward? That is much more difficult because you have to have a whole bunch of physics simulations built in. You have to know, like, if this happens, what's the result, cause and effect. You have to do a whole bunch of other things if it's not just a natural language search in a database. Okay, so this, it could be a search within a database, but if there's more analysis needed, especially on the physical simulation side, uh, that part, that one question that Picard asked, saying, what's the theoretical capability if we do this, that becomes a much more difficult thing, and I would be much more impressed with a robot that could do that. Okay, so um, then in a scene after that, Q kind of kidnaps Picard and Data and some others. Is there a red shirt there? I don't remember. Anyway, and they're in this old style court system, and Data becomes an instant lawyer, and I love it. Okay, I completely love it. I'm gonna say plausible on this. He contained like an encyclopedic knowledge of major history. Um, lots of decades old law trivia. But an interesting thing about this is it required foresight, right? Data would have had to take the time to essentially read the information, go looking for information, right? He had to like download and ingest the information into his mind before it's needed. And this is a pretty human-like idea of, memory and learning. So if, I mean, let's say that uh, a copy of Data existed but was like really lazy and didn't read anything, didn't, expose himself to any sort of knowledge, then I mean, he might have the physical capability to do these types of, recall um, requests, but he wouldn't have the memory there. So it requires foresight. He had to expose himself to information, and it's not like Data has this constant link to, to the cloud where he can just access all of that information. No, it's this pretty human-like idea of storing information locally within Data's mind, right? Within his body. Um, so I thought this was interesting because we try not to do that as much as we can right now, just because oh man, there's so much data. You don't want to store it locally, really, if you can. We have a lot of cloud stuff going on. So I thought that was interesting. And, his perfect recall, Data's perfect recall is better than humans, but yeah, that idea of learning material before, you can use it and storing it locally, that's a very human-like idea of memory. So I'm going plausible on this. Oh my goodness, but then we get to this part. This I just laugh at this. It's so amazing. There's a scene where Data um he mimics Picard's voice and then Q's voice to repeat like exactly what people said in court, like in their own voices. Um, how do you think a robot perfectly mimicking a human's voice and words would be received by people? I'm guessing today, like pretty badly. Like I love this. I love this. A lot of other people would not like it, but let's talk about this. So think about like court reporters. Okay, they have a really high workload. They have this shorthand that is personalized to them. They have this huge backlog of like trial transcripts that they have to, fully transcribe. Jurors are allowed, I think they're allowed to read transcripts, but not watch like TV or audio recording, playback of testimony. And there is so much information lost when speech is transcribed to text. Volume, silences, tone, sarcasm. Sometimes it's not what you say, but how you say it. And having someone who can directly repeat what just happened, like I think that would be awesome. Yeah, I just adore data. Think about schooling, like recalling each lecture perfectly, media interviews, trying to combat spin and say like, no, no, I said that in this way. Um, Diplomacy, right? Perfect recall of conversations, including tone and context. Like I think that's, yeah. Some people are probably freaking out about this, um, but data goes even further, right? Okay, so we have automatic speech recognition, which transcribes speech to text, and that could be used today to help out in a lot of these situations. It's not perfect, so we're not to the point where we want just like AI to completely take over without really working on this. But then again, people are not perfect either, right? Okay, but data goes a lot further in this clip than just automatic speech recognition, right? He listened to the conversation. He, you know, stored it, he remembered it. And then uh, he went further to recreate it perfectly with his own robotic musculature and voice, like with his own body. He just didn't like use himself as a tape recorder and play it back using his speakers. No, he recreated their voices perfectly with his own musculature. This is some nuanced control. He was altering how he speaks to mimic other speakers without practice. Okay? Without practice, he mimicked other speakers perfectly. It sounds like a recording, but it is not. This is so much more advanced in terms of like memory, control systems, robotic control than having a tape recorder that can be, rewound and replayed later. This tidbit, oh my goodness, this scene, like it is so cool to me as somebody who, works in robotics and AI. It's enough to freak a lot of people out, like I realize that, but it's enough to make me very happy. Like I love that little clip. Right? It would take years of research to replicate what happened in that one little clip of data perfectly replicating a prior conversation, mimicking other people's voices, cadence, tone perfectly on the first try without ever having practiced, right? Doing something without practicing is a huge deal in robotics, right? It's something we want, it's something we are actively working on. We are not there yet. Something the research community, you know, we want this, okay? We want to be able to do this. For example, like in reinforcement learning, which is a branch of machine learning, which is all under the umbrella of AI. So in reinforcement learning control systems, some researchers are trying to use simulation to learn a policy of the control system, almost like the agent thinking about something, and then transfer that to the physical robot in the end to polish up the controller. Learning everything directly on the robot, like through experience, would take too much time, right? You would have too much wear and tear on the robot, possibly wreck the robot, more likely than you would think. Doing a task on a physical robot without practicing is a big deal. So I love this clip. It's so cool. Um, And then toward the end of the episode, um, there's this scene. I think it's a pretty sweet scene between an aging Dr. McCoy and Data. And Data exactly recalls Dr. McCoy's age. And it turns into a very sweet interaction. But this is a possible human robot interaction issue, right? Um, a robot's actions and interactions with a human can evoke emotions in the human, and the human can also attribute like personality characteristics to the robot, which can be bad, right? Um, like in the scene before with Picard, Picard was annoyed and maybe started to think Data could be rude. Here, if somebody's asking you for your age or says your age exactly, for some people that can be seen as rude, right? And so, without any intent on the robot's part, like the robot's behavior can lead people to thinking that the robot has certain personality characteristics that maybe it doesn't, like rudeness, um, or malice or something like that. When that's not the case. Okay, so something to think about. I really like in this scene how McCoy naturally compared Data to a different sentient race rather than an inanimate machine, right? So there's this theory in AI. It's the theory, like a theory of socially interactive robotics, and it says that essentially that people want to interact with robots as if the robot is a human. And so I thought this was just a really sweet interaction that's along that vein of thinking that, they were interacting, they were speaking to each other, and, Dr. McCoy in his rather cantankerous way is, comparing Data to a Vulcan, um, instead of thinking like, oh, you're an android, like you're not real, you're just some machine. I, I thought it was sweet. I thought it was really sweet. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Data's appearance. Okay, so Data's humanoid, right? Um, but there were some decisions in his design that appear like not a normal human. Like he has this really, really white skin. He has these golden eyes. We, yeah, that he nobody looks at him and thinks, oh yeah, I've seen somebody just like him, right? And those decisions on physical appearance have ramifications, a lot of ramifications on human robot interaction. Um, One of them is on the good side, right? So, um, this difference in appearance, making it clear that Data is not human, might actually build some trust or avoid some different issues, right? Because if people interact with Data and then they realize later that he's not human, right? Or if you were to interact with a robot and then realize later that like it's not human, people might feel lied to, when discovering that that's not the case. And this can lead to a lot of, long-term negative issues that are very difficult to overcome. Things like loss of trust, fear, just all sorts of negative things that you don't want to get into. So by having his physical appearance be not perfectly human, you might avoid some of these negative feelings evoked in people. Um, but on the other hand, it creates this obvious separation between like humans and android, right? That there is a difference there, and this can possibly have some negative ramifications. It can maybe decrease empathy of humans for the robot, and it might be easier for a human to ask a robot to perform, dangerous or unpleasant tasks, to not think of the robot as, having the same sorts of rights and sentience as a human, or just to be an asshole. Yeah. So it's not the best to create, or you at least have to be aware if your physical and aesthetic design decisions are doing something that can affect, well, it will affect human robot interaction. but if it could actually, decrease a person's empathy toward the system. Okay. And it does propagate this idea of, humans not treating the robot as human. Okay, so anyway, these are just a few thoughts that I had on the first episode of the first season of Star Trek The Next Generation. I absolutely adore Data, the sweet summer child, and I hope you liked this. I hope you liked some of these insights. Maybe it's a little bit of a different perspective than you're used to. So hit like, subscribe, notifications, and the bell, all the YouTube things. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm really excited to talk with people about this. So, yeah, have a good day.